Mr. Brandon Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's a real honor and pleasure to have you. I am really excited for this conversation. I'm going to completely surrender to what shows up today. And just for the listeners, he kind of just stopped me before we started recording, and we did a quick 3 to 4 minute breath work exercise, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about breath work during the episode, but I feel incredibly centered and grounded and energized. And so I'm just really honored that you're here and excited for this discussion.
Thank you. Thanks for playing along with
Yeah.
my experiment.
Yeah. And one of the things that really drew me to you, and we've never really met before, and I've started following you and reached out to you through social media, and we had a few discussions about recording this podcast. And now that I'm thinking about it, as we close off the year and we start to reflect, we have a few pillars in the Rich Equation about energy and awareness. And it's just so fitting that you're here today, because I think we're going to have a really great conversation and I'm really looking forward for you to provide some insight on just how we can get more in touch with ourselves, our awareness, our spirituality. So it's going to be a real deep conversation today. So I just can't wait for this. This is going to be great. You were in the body of work of, consciousness and energy work and breath work and self-love. Tell me first about your journey to get where you are today and what led you to this work, and how you got here.
Okay.
I feel very calm today. I don't have my normal pumping energy, but it's amazing. I feel really, really grounded. So really interesting pace. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Perfect. Happy to hear that. It's funny, the first thing that comes to mind, which is very different this time than when other people have asked me this, is the person I am today. I would have never imagined even wanting to hang out with a person like I am today back 10 or 20 years ago. And I think that just illustrates how much I've changed, and I'm doing things I never would have imagined doing and never even wanted to do. And now I love my life and more grateful for my life than I've ever been. And I have visions for my future, but also I'm very content with where I'm at every day. So it's a nice mix of moving forward, but also being present. So to answer your question, I was always into math and numbers, and it led me to engineering. I was also I was playing Monopoly at a young age. Even I remember one time my mom was making dinner, and I must have been 5 years old, and I asked her to play Monopoly, and she always remembered this experience of me asking her to play Monopoly, and she was too busy. She was making dinner. So I played myself, and she sat there and she saw me basically beside her at the table or whatever, playing Monopoly with myself, because I loved numbers. I loved money and wanted to make money. And so from a very young age, I was into numbers. It was very clear. And I think it was grade 9 where we did an investigation on what we wanted to do when we grew up. And all I looked at is what made the most money or guaranteed the most money. So I studied engineering based on that alone. And I knew I was good at math and all the other sciences relating to math. And I was not good at English, but I realized I was okay, I got to get good at English if I want to do this. And the other things carried that along. So I studied engineering, started working as an engineer. Then along the way, I got into investing, and I started studying, and I completed my CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst designation. I had the intention to go work on Wall Street. In that period, while I was doing my CFA, I started investing in real estate, and that led me to essentially having everything I wanted by the age of 30. And I still wasn't happy. I had everything I thought I needed to be happy, which was all external to me. And a big part of that, accomplishments, money, it was not so much to do with status, but there was a status piece of it too. I always thought like, oh, once I got my engineering degree, or once I got my CFA, or once I had all these houses or something else, then life would be what I wanted it to be, and I would be happy. And so I got to this point, I wasn't happy. Around that time, I started reading this book that was an unusual book for me. Like I read a lot on investing, business, anything that I thought would help me in making money or business. And this book was The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, which was actually recommended by
Robin Sharma, of course.
Yeah. And so having never read a book like this, I got about halfway through it in a few days, and I was like, do people actually live like this? Like, this sounds pretty crazy, but maybe it's something I should like look into a little bit, because I'm not happy. And then, so 3 days after I started reading that book, my mom got diagnosed with terminal cancer, which I thought my mom was going to be around for another like 50 years. And so that was those two things in combination. And even the book by Robin Sharma rocked my world to the point that, there was a day, my mom got diagnosed in July 2016. There was a day I remember in August where I started thinking about like, maybe I should just kill myself. And I didn't plan it out, but that one day was enough to make me realize like, okay, there's got to be another way here. And I started reading every book I could get my hands on, specifically regarding to happiness. But I read about 100 books, probably in like 6 months or so. And then that led me to meditation. That led me to breath work. I dabbled in plant medicine here and there over the years. It led me to looking at every continent and how they lived, and all these different mystical practices and cultures. And
you went off the deep end.
Yeah. There was this period, like over the last 5 to 6 years, I'll say, like there was a lot of searching and seeking. And as of probably 2 to 3 years ago, I feel like that has came to not a halt, but I've slowed down on it to the point that I don't feel like I'm looking for anything anymore. And it's more me being present with myself and learning to love myself more and embracing myself without feeling like I need to figure out a practice or a new way of life.
Wow, I love that story. It's really interesting. I honestly feel like I have a very similar story in a lot of ways to that, which I think is why we've connected so naturally, and is a big reason why I've launched the podcast, because I think that for me, growing up, I kind of naturally had these same instincts as you. Like I was very good at math. I studied finance and accounting, getting into business. I come from an entrepreneurial family. Business comes very naturally to me, or I'm an operator, right? We are very efficient doing and all that. And by the age of 30 to 32 or so, I kind of achieved the same things of like, I've done everything that I thought society told me to do, or that I was supposed to accomplish, and yet I'm not fully fulfilled. Like, why? And now I didn't probably go completely off the deep end like you did into this like worldly spiritual journey, but for me, I really needed to redefine what it meant to be rich, like what it meant to find peace and happiness. Maybe not even peace, just joy and happiness, and focus on the present. Because I think that, and you would agree, is that like when you're in that hamster wheel, you're often thinking about the future. You're not really ever thinking about the present. Is that
absolutely
right? So I think that there's a skill set to that, and that can be really great at sometimes. But if you're not aware that you're doing it all the time, then you're actually chasing something that never will ever have fulfillment. So I just appreciate your story because it really does resonate with me. And one of the things I really want to talk about with you and share with the audience is about this whole philosophy of breaking patterns, because here we are in 2021. We're trying to reflect on what happened in this past year? What can we learn from this year? What can we take into next year? And like, you have built your, and I love, and I'll share even with the audience, like the way you shared your bio was like, I'm changing all the time. I don't have a bio. Like, you know, I don't know how to define myself, because every time I realize who I am, I'm just evolving to the next level of who I am. So, you know, I think that there's a big lesson in that. So can you speak to just, you know, how can we, let me think about what the question is, right? Like, how can we become more aware about our patterns and start to make more conscious choices about the things we want to do? I mean, not everyone wants to go be a Buddha and live in the mountains and, you know, meditate 40 hours a day, but there are some real practices and real applicable, you know, practices from your knowledge and your work. So how can we apply these skill sets to being more present, breaking our patterns, being more still in a life that is incredibly busy? Perhaps we still are incredibly ambitious too. Who knows, right? Just speak to that a little bit.
There's many things you've said that I feel like I could talk about for the next half hour.
Go ahead, do it.
And so if I might get sidetracked from your question, and please,
it's okay,
reel me back in if you feel called to. I appreciate that you appreciated my response on the bio. I was curious if you were gonna respond being like, I need more information, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. And to speak to that, I don't remember exactly what I put, but I'm like, there's all these things we identify ourselves by. And anytime we're identifying ourselves as something, we're being held to that in a sense. And the more we can let go of our identities, the more space there is for it to become something new. And if there's something we are that we want to continue, well, sure, I personally am trying to let go of all identifications, but maybe there's a time and place for identification, and maybe you give yourself a title that inspires you. Change, being, you know, you mentioned, like, you asked about becoming aware of it, and I feel like awareness is the key to anything, like to changing. The first step is to become aware. And then through becoming aware, then you're naturally going to change. If you become aware that, I'm trying to think of an example, that you're a bad driver, maybe you're going to take driving lessons, or paying more attention to the way you're driving, or do something to change the way you're driving. Or if you become aware that you're a bad singer and you care about singing in front of other people, you're going to do something to make a change to your ability to sing. There's so many things, I feel like they're different pieces that in a sense are intertwined to creating change, but yet separate. And so I'm probably going to say this in many different ways. Every moment we have a focus, and for many of us, we've lost that focus and the ability to hold the tension. I think one of the worst things we can do is do something like watch TV for hours a day. Not that watching TV itself is bad, but you can, like, once we're shutting off our attention completely and becoming unconscious, that's going to be the habit that forms life. And so becoming aware of our attention, where we're focusing from moment to moment, and that's the cause. And so from a cause and effect level, or you can call it karma, or you can call it anything you want, every moment we have a focus, and that focus is the cause, and it's going to create an effect in our life. And so what are those effects we want to create in our life? And stepping back and being very present in our life. And you mentioned something about being present is not easy. I've realized even with time, like I became aware of presence, I would say 5 to 6 years ago. And through that, it's been a constant practice of learning how to be present. Even now, I realize, like, there's times where it's like, I get up and I'm meditating, and while I'm meditating, I use some air quotes there, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next, and I have to catch myself in my meditation and bring myself back to the present moment and bring my energy back to myself. And then maybe next I'm making breakfast, and while I'm making breakfast, I might be thinking about showering, and when I'm showering, I might be thinking about what I'm going to do next. And we're always thinking about what we're going to do next instead of focusing on what we're actually doing. And it's a very, very difficult habit to undo. It takes a lot of practice, and I don't understand the exact science behind it all, but I know like one piece of it is we're always trying to be productive, and multitasking in my mind is one of the it's taken me a lot to undo, and I've realized it's difficult to undo multitasking the more and more we've done it. I do not see it as a beneficial quality to multitask. I've went in the opposite direction, trying to be very, very present with what am I doing in this moment, and doing just one thing. Even if that's like, if I'm cooking, am I cooking, or am I cooking and listening to music, or am I cooking and talking, or what am I doing? And it can be difficult when you're on friends or whatever else, and it's very hard to pay attention to what you're doing when you're with another person, because there's always a conversation happening there typically. I mentioned in meditation, and I feel like meditation is a great practice to make us more aware, along with different forms of meditation. Meditation, what most of us are doing with meditation is actually just concentration. It's a practice to develop our concentration and our focus. Meditation itself is when there's no thoughts there. And that takes a very, very, very long time to actually get to that point of meditation without thoughts. And I don't recommend trying to get there to start. And so when we're meditating, and let's say we're just being with ourselves, we're pulling our energy back from all these external places that we've been focusing our energy. So you can imagine, sometimes I've recently, if I'm working with a client that I'm coaching, let's say, I'll get them to make a list or a map showing like where all their energy is going. And for instance, like I'll name a few things, like maybe you have a house, you have a car, you have food, you have your laptop, your emails, your phone, WhatsApp, Instagram, whatever other social media, you have your dog, your cat, you have your parents, your in-laws, your partner, your friends, or even people you don't like.
Your laptop, your email, your calendar, your customers.
So especially like, it's one thing to make a list of this, but once you draw a map, it's very clear. You see where all of your energy is going. And the first time I did this, and this wasn't before I got into spirituality or meditation or any of that. It was a few years ago, and I realized, I'm like, wow, what energy do I have left for myself? And so when all of our energy is going outwards, there's no energy left for ourselves. And you can imagine, like, we have an energetic field around us that we draw on if we're getting sick, or if we want to create something, or whatever else we're doing in life. And when all of our energy is going outwards, we're drawing from that energetic field and depleting it. Where in meditation, we're bringing our energy back to ourselves. And that doesn't have to be with our eyes closed. Even if we're sitting in a lineup at the bank, let's say, or standing, probably standing, we can be judging the person beside us. We can be impatiently waiting for our turn, or we can be focused on our breath, on our body. We can be focused on gratitude, on how much we love ourselves, how much we love life. Even if it's not true, we can still practice thinking that and bring those emotions. And so by bringing that energy back to ourselves, we're gonna create that energetic field around us that we've been drawing on for many years. Let's say more and more, it's become very clear to me that, you hear about miracles of people healing cancer, terminal cancer, whatever else, like people who couldn't walk becoming able to walk again. And Joe Dispenza's work is a great example of people go to his workshops for a few days and they change their life, they heal their life, they whatever needs to be done. And some of these people don't do it in days, but they might do the work for months or a year or 2 years, and they change their life. And essentially, one of the main things he's teaching people is what I just described: just bring your energy back to yourself. And there's many meditations you can do, but you can do it day to day as you're going through your day, versus like just being aware of where all your energy is going.
Let me reflect a couple of thoughts and maybe you can help clear my head, right? Is that what you're saying is essentially that if we, as we live our life and as we impart against this material plane that we live in, all our energy goes outward. And as our energy goes outward, and we are all energy, right? I don't know if like we are cells and those cells are made up of atoms and the atoms are made up of energy. Like we are fundamentally all connected through energy. So I can understand that philosophy that, if we bring that energy back and bring it into the present, then what you're saying is that energy allows us to actually heal and to become the best version of ourselves. But if we don't do that, then we're actually always operating from a place of, what would you say, like trauma, or we're broken, or we're missing something, or we're in a program. Like what, I'm trying to understand how to, and maybe my mind is now trying to solve it, right? Like my ego and my mind is trying to understand it in a way that, anyways, thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah, kind of. Like a number of the things you said, I'm like, broken sounds a little harsh. But also like you mentioned a few words and I kind of was like, it's kind of all of it. And like programming is a big piece of it that we can talk about too.
Yeah.
But,
I think that's what it is, right? It's like it is our programming. And so by being able to connect with ourselves, bring our energy back, create our awareness, then perhaps we can identify with the patterns and the programming that we are at that moment and redefine that programming, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. Maybe I'll talk a bit about programming, which is a huge part of change. But first, to try to answer your question and make sure that I've been clear on, I said a lot over the last like few minutes, 10 minutes. I don't know how long I talked for there. And, for me, it's very clear and became very clear with time. Like these things that we call dis-ease, it's just dis-ease of your body. I believe we all have some dis-ease in our body. And we're all externally focused to some degree. I'm not a big believer of spending your whole life in a cave, keeping all your energy inwards. But I imagine those people have very strong energy fields around them. Personally, I believe focusing inwards and protecting your energy. I had a friend who was supposed to come stay this week, and I had to draw like a boundary for myself, explaining to her that I need to focus my energy inwards right now. Like a few days ago, I was feeling my immune system starting to feel a little bit weak, not sick or anything, but I'm very in tune to if I need to keep my energy in versus creating something or serving someone or whatever that looks like. And so through this, and like you imagine these guys in caves even who spend their whole life doing it, there's the ability to go out and to create, to connect with people and everything in a whole new way. And so there's a balance between having your energy focused inwards and then when it's externally focused. And so like that map, like a map or a list that I was describing, like making a list or a map of where your energy is focused. As of a few years ago, I was surprised some of these places. I'm like, why am I putting energy into this? And very, very quickly, I started identifying places to bring my energy back. Like, I don't need to check Instagram 10 times a day or just as one simple example, because I feel like most of us have social media these days and probably put more energy into it than we need to. And not that there's anything wrong with it. Like, I'm sure what we're talking about here will end up on social media platforms in a way. And I hope what we're talking about is beneficial for some people. So once you start identifying where your energy is going, you can refine it. And now I still go through it I don't know if it's like every few months, but I'll look at where my energy is going. And I'm like, wow, my energy is going into 20 things right now, and 19 of them feel good. There's only one thing that I'm like, why is my energy going into this? Where before it was kind of the flip of that.
Right. You know, one of the things that I am really guilty of is being an extremist to certain things. And so, for example, you know, you talked about being aware about our patterns and breaking these habitual patterns. And you talk a lot about willpower as well in a lot of your content. And, you know, for me, if, like, let's say it's about Instagram or it's about email or it's about something that I notice I'm pouring my energy into that is not adding the most value or the most productivity or energy to me, I just shut it out of my life. I don't know how to create boundaries and, you know, manage it better. It's just like black and white, right? And so sometimes what I realize is that's unsustainable, right? Or I know a lot of people do this with exercise or dieting or whatever. We all go into these like incredibly strong, you know, boundaries. Like we go way extreme because we have the willpower at that moment to do that, but it's not possible for a period of time. And so it ends up always falling off. Can you speak to that as we think about, like, okay, there are some things in my life even that I'm aware about right now that I want to be more aware about and create consciousness around. And I guess my previous thinking would be, I just need to shut that out of my life, like get out of it, stop it. But sometimes that's not the right answer. It's really becoming more intentional about it, watching yourself as you do those things, recalibrate, you know what I mean? So like, speak to that. And if I'm on the right track or off track, like sure. get me on a right track. Cause I'm sure that a lot of listeners have similar things going on in their life that they're like, yeah, dude, I agree. I need to work out 7 times a day, 45 minutes a day. Like, well, that's not physically possible and it's not sustainable. So what is sustainable? Or am I asking the wrong question?
I don't think there's any right and wrong. So
touche.
That'll explain where I'm going with this. I used to be someone who thought there was right and wrong, and I was trying to get life right, and I still am at times trying to get life right. And I catch myself in it. I'm like, well, why am I trying to get this right, whatever I'm doing? And it might even just be from day to day. Like, I'm like, should I meditate more? Should I do another podcast? Should I serve people more? Should I whatever? And it's just trying to get life right in a sense. And a couple patterns that I've let go of that are very common in people, I feel like, that have went down paths like you and me of achieving and becoming successful more from, I'm going to say, like the standards of society, which I struggle to use the word success now. And I put the word success in the title of my book, which I kind of cringe at times. And I'm accepting of, like, yeah, that was me in the past. And so I'm not trying to do, like, there's no right and wrong. I'm not trying to figure things out. I'm not trying to understand. I'm not trying to do things right. I'm not trying to be productive. I often ask myself, I'm like, what would I be doing if there is nothing to accomplish, nothing to achieve, nothing within me that needed to be improved? And on the improving side, there was always external things I was trying to improve. And then that shifted to internal things, I think, that I was trying to improve. Often we start this inner journey of looking within ourselves. And even with that, we're trying to improve ourselves versus allowing ourselves just to be and being accepting of ourselves the way we are in that moment. And so I'd like to come back to, you know, a lot of what I've shared, then people are going to be like, well, how do I change if I'm not trying, or if I'm not, you know, like willpower. I've started to realize willpower is something that comes from our conscious mind, which is like, let's 5% of our brain is the conscious mind, 95% is subconscious, which is our programming. So 95% of what we do is based on programming, but that other 5% is like we have an analytical side to us, creativity and willpower. Like, we're not going to get out of the bed in the morning if we don't have enough willpower to do it. And that's also a piece of, if we don't have enough energy, like I was talking about earlier, you may just lay in bed all day. You may lay on the couch all day. So a piece of like, I think doing those things like getting off the couch, getting out of bed, going to the gym, creating something in life is, willpower is necessary for that. Energy is necessary for that. More important than willpower, I feel like once you have that willpower to do something, is the programming in the subconscious mind. And that's where you can really make changes. Like you described, like wanting something just to change, but it seems like there's like, it's not as easy as just saying like, I want to change this belief, deciding the belief you want to believe. You can say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself all day. And a lot of people, I think, nowadays there's a lot of guidance around using affirmations.
There sure is, yeah.
But an affirmation and saying something doesn't do anything if you don't believe it. You can say it 100 times, 1,000 times, you can say it all day, every day. And until you actually believe it, it's not going to change anything. And that's where these mantras, affirmations, where they came from. And you see this in a lot of different works. You see that there's two things paired together. There's the intention, which is the affirmation or the mantra or whatever you're saying. There's also an energetic component. Everything's energy, but there's an emotional component. So when you're saying whatever you're saying, you need to have a strong emotion, an elevated emotion that is strong enough that that intention and that emotion and the energy behind it is stronger than whatever you want to override and replace. So if you were told something at the age of 2 or 3 years old or whatever else that made you believe that you stopped loving yourself, or you thought you needed to have some kind of accomplishment to love yourself or to be enough for whoever, or to get approval. And these are very common things that I'm describing about, like, I'm not enough. That's a big belief. Or I need this for approval. I need this to be enough. I need this accomplishment. I need this status. I need money. I need looks. Like men are often looking for money, status, whatever. Women are often trying to look better. And so when there's enough emotion and with intention, the energy of that, if it's stronger than the energy of all the previous experiences, like maybe you've had experiences of this your whole life, 100 of them, 1,000 of them, making you believe you're not enough and that you don't love yourself. Once the energy of this new experience is strong enough, it'll override the old experiences. And then a combination of, maybe you do it 10 times, and the combination of those 10 experiences and the energy of those 10 experiences, where you really sit down with yourself and really truly look into like loving yourself and feeling it. And Joe Dispenza, he suggests a lot in his meditations. There's a lot of work around creating elevated emotions. And so our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts go together. Whatever we're thinking is going to create our feelings, and whatever we're feeling is going to create our thoughts. And it goes in a cycle. We're never going to think greater than our feelings, our emotions. So if we can create emotions and focus on those, that's going to put us in a state that allows us to have different thoughts. And it works the other way too. Like if we start thinking, like if we do say, yes, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, even if we're not believing it yet, that may help us tune into a feeling of, I love myself, I love my life, and then embracing that feeling. And they're going to work hand in hand, but it's easier if you start with the emotion.
With the emotion. Really powerful. I really encourage people to listen to that over and over, because you just dropped a lot of content in that last 10 minutes. One of the things I want to ask you personally is, do you have a daily routine that allows you to, walk us through your daily routine? that allows you to you are a contributing member of society. I mean, you're not just living in a cave. You have a business and you help others and you are on social media and all that, but you also are incredibly present and really aware. And I can just notice in the way that you speak too is your intentionality around the words that you use and your languaging. So if somebody's looking to really increase this level of awareness in their life, what can they do in their daily life, right? Routine is such an important pillar to me too, because I think there's secrets in everybody's routines on how we can live a more productive and more successful life, or be more. So
Okay. This could be an episode on its own.
Yeah, probably. Well, we have a few more minutes, so go ahead.
Okay. I'll tie this into what I was just sharing on, and change starts with your thoughts. Becoming aware of your thoughts. From your thoughts, that determines your choices, your actions, your behaviors, your perception of life. And your reality of life. Like, our perception of life is our reality. You can live in the same house with someone else and have be in a different world, a different reality. And you start to see this as your perception changes and you're aware of it, that we're all in like very different worlds in a sense. You can't just change your perception. It all comes back to your thoughts. Everything starts as a thought. And then there's the emotional piece of it too. So if you want to change your life, change your thoughts, change your emotions, start there. And then you'll change your actions, your choices, your behaviors, your perception of life. So day to day, I'm very, very, very conscious throughout my day at different points of like, what is my emotional state and what are my thoughts, and am I present? Am I aware of my breath? I focus on my heart a lot if I'm out in public now, because it's just an easy place to tune into love, to tune into gratitude. I try to watch my mind more versus being in it, thinking. I try to observe, like, what are my thoughts right now, and just observing like the things that go through my mind. And it's comical at times. Like, instead of being caught up in something that may be causing me to be suffering, I'm going to say, in a way, I'm like laughing about it. I'm like, why would I be thinking that? Why am I judging this person? Why am I? and to go back to what you're asking, what I've just described is more what my day is now. It's very intentional. There's not so much routines. I try to, as much as I think routines it was the most powerful thing that got me shifting my life. I had like a 3-hour routine every morning. I would get up, I would meditate, I would journal, I would have my smoothie, I would have a glass of water right when I got out of bed, I would reflect on my dreams, I would have a cold shower, all these things. And it became like a program. And back to what I shared before, like, there's, I don't like the words good and bad, but I'm going to say there's good programs and there's bad programs. So I was putting good programs into my life, and I'm still am at times. Like, I've been immersed in Joe Dispenza's work this last month. I've went through his course about 5 times online, and just like, basically I'm like, not that I want to be Joe Dispenza, but I'm like, okay, well, an experiment. What happens if I expose myself to Joe Dispenza for 5 hours a day? Like, how is that going to change my mind? And so we can program ourselves very well with routines. Also, there becomes a time where I feel like we want to be intentional about, like, okay, if I'm going to sit down in the morning now, most days I start my day with meditation and breath work and a little bit of movement. And that often it's like, I would say like 1 to 3 hours. And the first 3 hours of every day, typically I will not look at my phone unless I have to for some reason. But on top of that, I won't schedule anything with anyone. Like, the first 3 hours of the day is my time. I shut my phone off from somewhere between 7 and 9 p.m. until 9 a.m. So I give myself 12 to 14 hours away from my phone, away from the world. I don't live with anyone, so that's easier than when I was in a relationship last. It was a little more difficult to give myself that time because you're living with someone. But it was my time, including her, I'm going to say. And so giving myself that time, I would say that's the biggest part of my routine that is a constant, is giving myself that time. And then what I was saying before, if I wake up and I don't feel like meditating, and sometimes I even experiment, I'm like, what happens if I don't meditate today? Then am I going to be okay? And there was a time where I was like, I would feel like I was thrown off if I didn't meditate.
Yeah, I agree.
I've went like a year, a couple times, like without alcohol, for instance. And I felt like, and you said something before, and I think this is an important piece, that like we draw a line and we tell ourselves we can't do something, like we can't have a drink again, or we're going to do this every day. We're forcing something that is not coming natural in a way. And there's always that draw back to it. So like an alcoholic, for instance, who draws a line in the sand and just says they're never going to drink it again, but they want to drink it, there's a desire to drink, then they have a drink 5 years later and they fall back into that pattern of the past, where like I've experimented at times with like letting go of meditation, see what happens. I've experimented with having a drink to see what happens. I've experimented with these things just to make sure that I do have it within me to intentionally choose what I want with each situation.
I have a few more minutes, but what's really interesting, and I said this when I started this episode, is I'm just going to surrender to what shows up today. And I feel like I can listen to you for hours, mostly because the things that you're sharing are really different than the things that we listen to on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's something really soothing about breaking our patterns of thinking and patterns of what we think is normal and what we're programmed to think on a daily basis. So I just want to really honor you for sharing and doing this work and helping others, Sherpa people through this work. I can't imagine that, I just feel so much more grounded and more aware and intentional already just through the conversation. So I hope that the listeners do as well. And I have a couple last questions before we wrap up here.
Can I share one thing quick?
Of course.
That just ties into what I was sharing on, even because, I shared, like, I don't know if it's clear, like there's a lot of experiments that go on in my life, and sometimes they're 5 minutes, but sometimes I have these little experiments that may last 1, 2, 3 days or longer. And once I started looking at life as an experiment, and like all of life is an experience, and like I
love that.
For me, it's been difficult to remember how to be a child and to play, and now anything I do, I look to play and enjoy it and laugh. But looking at everything as an experiment and being curious about it, like that's like when you're 1, 2 years old, everything's an experiment and you're curious about what's going to happen.
Yeah, I love that. So powerful, man. Let me ask you one last question. We ask this to all guests, but what does it mean to be rich to you?
I'll share with the audience. When I first saw the name of the podcast, as I shared with you, I was like, the rich equation. That sounds like me 5 years ago or whatever. But as I looked at who you are, and through conversations, I've started to get a better feel, and I'd love to know more about your story, actually, because it seems very inspiring and interesting. Like however you've gone to what you're doing and everything you're sharing, I love, and that's a big part of why I was very enthused to be on this podcast with you and to have a conversation.
I appreciate that.
What is the rich equation to me?
No, what does it mean to be rich?
Oh, what does it mean to be rich? I feel it has nothing to do with money, and that's been quite clear to me for some time. But even more and more, it's nothing to do with anything external to me for the most part. I still very much value connection in my life, but it's more about what is my state of being? How am I feeling? And there's a difference between happiness and joy in my mind. Like happiness is from the mind, and it's all what you're looking for externally, where joy is a state that comes from within. So for me, being rich is feeling love, feeling gratitude, feeling joy, being inspired, feeling blessed, awe, feeling freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want. And none of those things cost money. None of those things require possessions. And all those things, like, you know, I will say the one external thing, like, connection is very important to me. But as I love myself, as I realize truth in myself, I allow myself to share that with everyone around me and love the people around me, recognize the truth of who they are, love the world around me, recognize the truth of the world around me.
Oh, so powerful. Dude, it's really a pleasure and an honor to know you and to have you on the podcast, of course, but to just give the world what you're sharing is a real gift. And I just honor you for that. And yeah, I encourage the audience to reach out. We'll put all your links and how to find you. You're really active on social media, and so it's not difficult to find you and find your content, and you put out so much free content as well. So I really encourage the audience to go and find Brandon and reach out to him if you want to learn more. But namaste, my brother.
Thank you. I look forward to our future conversations.
Absolutely.